He's hiding in the Middle East right now, a fugitive wanted for attempted murder. Just 5 years ago, Antonio Brown was celebrating a Super Bowl victory, earning millions as one of the NFL's elite receivers. Today, he's bankrupt, facing 15 years behind bars, and running from the law after allegedly grabbing a security guard's gun and firing shots at a boxing event in Miami. This is the story of how an NFL superstar who earned over $80 million became a wanted with -3 million in net worth. The rise was spectacular. The fall, absolutely devastating. Most people think Antonio Brown's problems started when he became famous. They're wrong. The chaos began long before he ever stepped foot on an NFL field, rooted in a childhood that would shape every destructive decision he'd make as an adult. Born in Miami to Eddie Brown, a legend in the Arena Football League known as Touchdown Eddie, Antonio seemed destined for greatness. His father wasn't just good, he was the greatest player in arena football history, inducted into their Hall of Fame. Football was literally in his blood. But having a famous athlete for a father didn't guarantee a stable childhood. When Antonio was just 16, his world collapsed. His parents divorced, and in the aftermath, he found himself kicked out of his own home. For 6 brutal months, he was homeless, bouncing between friends' couches, sleeping in his car, scraping together money for cheap motels. Picture this, a future NFL millionaire at 16, not knowing where he'd sleep each night. The instability was crushing, but it forged something dangerous inside him, an obsession with control and a deep mistrust that would follow him forever. The homelessness ended, but the psychological impact never did. Antonio developed an almost manic work ethic, as if he was constantly trying to outrun that scared 16-year-old who had nowhere to go. He dominated at Miami Norland High School, earning Athlete of the Year honors. College was rocky. Academic struggles kept him from Florida State, forcing him through prep classes and eventually Central Michigan University. But even there, his talent was undeniable. He set school records, racked up over 3,000 receiving yards, and decided to enter the NFL draft after his junior year. Nobody could have predicted what came next. Draft Day 2010. Round after round passed without Antonio's name being called. Elite receivers were going in the first and second rounds, while scouts questioned whether this Central Michigan product could compete at the highest level. Finally, in the 6th round, pick 195, the Pittsburgh Steelers took a chance. It was one of the greatest steals in NFL draft history, but Antonio would never forget being overlooked. That chip on his shoulder, it was massive, and it would drive both his greatest triumphs and his most spectacular failures. The transformation was immediate. Antonio didn't just make the team, he revolutionized what it meant to be a wide receiver. His route running was surgical precision, his hands were magnetic, and his ability to create separation was otherworldly. By his second season, he was eclipsing 1,000-yard marks in both receiving and returns. The Steelers rewarded him with a 5-year, $42 million extension. Then came an even bigger payday, a massive contract that made him the highest-paid receiver in the NFL. 7 Pro Bowl selections, 4 first-team All-Pro honors, and statistics that put him in the conversation with Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. But success brought scrutiny, and scrutiny revealed cracks in Antonio's foundation. The first major red flag came in 2016 when he did something unprecedented. He live-streamed his coach's private post-game speech on Facebook. Millions of viewers watched Mike Tomlin's confidential team meeting, including Tomlin calling the New England Patriots a holes before the AFC Championship game. It was a massive breach of trust, exposing internal team dynamics to the entire world. The NFL fined him. Teammates were furious, but Antonio seemed confused by the backlash. To him, he was just sharing his excitement. To everyone else, it was a warning sign of someone who couldn't understand boundaries. The cracks became fractures during the 2018 season. Despite posting incredible numbers, becoming just the 3rd receiver in NFL history to reach 10,000 career yards, Antonio's relationship with the Steelers imploded. Reports surfaced of heated arguments with quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, tension with coaches, and increasingly erratic behavior. The breaking point came before Week 17 against Cincinnati. Antonio skipped practice, missed a team walkthrough, and when coaches benched him for the finale, he disappeared at halftime and never returned. His 9-year Steelers career was over, ending not with celebration, but with betrayal and confusion. What happened next was unprecedented in NFL history. In less than 12 months, Antonio Brown would play for 3 different teams, burn through guaranteed money that most people couldn't earn in 10 lifetimes, and destroy relationships with some of the league's most respected organizations. The 2019 season became a masterclass in self-destruction that still leaves executives shaking their heads. The Oakland Raiders thought they were getting a steal when they traded for Antonio and signed him to a 3-year, $50 million deal with $30 million guaranteed. They had no idea they were about to witness one of the most bizarre episodes in professional sports history. Training camp started with Antonio posting photos of his frostbitten feet on social media. Apparently, he'd entered a cryotherapy chamber without proper footwear, missing 11 of 13 practices as a result. Then came the helmet controversy. Antonio filed a grievance against the NFL because they wouldn't let him wear his old, outdated helmet model. He literally threatened to retire over headgear. The Raiders tried to be patient, but Antonio's behavior escalated daily. He posted a private voicemail from Coach John Gruden, got into a screaming match with General Manager Mike Mayock, and allegedly used a racial slur during the confrontation. When the team fined him $54,000 for missing mandatory activities, Antonio went nuclear on social media, demanding his release. The Raiders, who had just guaranteed him $30 million, cut him before he played a single regular season snap. In one move, Antonio had walked away from generational wealth over petty disputes and wounded pride. But here's where the story gets really wild. Within hours of his release, the New England Patriots signed him to a $15 million deal. The timing was so suspicious that many wondered if Antonio had orchestrated the entire Raiders fiasco just to land with Tom Brady and a championship contender. For a brief moment, it looked like genius-level manipulation. Then reality hit like a sledgehammer. Just days after signing with New England, Antonio's former trainer Brittany Taylor filed a federal lawsuit, alleging he had her on 3 separate occasions, including. The details were horrific, painting a picture of a man who believed his fame made him untouchable. Before the Patriots could even process these allegations, a second woman came forward with similar accusations. Sports Illustrated published an explosive investigation revealing a pattern of alleged misconduct and unpaid debts. When Antonio responded by sending threatening text messages to one of his accusers, while he was a member of the Patriots, the team had seen enough. They released him after just 1 game. In less than a year, Antonio had gone from elite NFL receiver to unemployable. He'd walked away from over $40 million in guaranteed money, faced multiple serious legal accusations, and burned bridges with 3 NFL franchises. The transformation was so complete, so devastating, that even his harshest critics felt a moment of sympathy. This wasn't just career, it was public psychological collapse happening in real time. The NFL suspended Antonio for the first 8 weeks of the 2020 season, but by then, most assumed his career was finished. That's when Tom Brady intervened. The greatest quarterback in NFL history convinced the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to take a chance on the troubled receiver. It seemed like pure charity, until Antonio proved he still had magic left. He contributed to Tampa Bay's Super Bowl run, catching passes from Brady in the championship game, and finally earning the ring that had eluded him his entire career. For a brief, shining moment, it looked like redemption was possible. The Buccaneers re-signed Antonio for the 2021 season, offering him another chance to rebuild his reputation and his bank account. But the same demons that had haunted him throughout his career were still lurking beneath the surface. In December 2021, the NFL suspended him for 3 games after discovering he'd used a fake vaccination card during the COVID pandemic. The lie was so unnecessary, so easily avoidable, that it raised questions about Antonio's judgment and honesty. Then came January 2nd, 2022. A date that will live in NFL infamy. During the 3rd quarter of a game against the New York Jets, with Tampa Bay trailing and needing every weapon available, Antonio suddenly started removing his equipment on the sideline. Off came the jersey, then the shoulder pads, then the shirt. He threw his gloves into the stands, waved to the crowd, and jogged off the field shirtless while his teammates watched in horror. The Buccaneers were literally in the middle of a play when their receiver decided he was done. It was unprecedented, embarrassing, and final. Antonio later claimed he was injured and that coaches were forcing him to play hurt. but the team disputed his account. The visual was too bizarre, too public, too destructive for any explanation to matter. The Buccaneers released him days later, and at 33 years old, Antonio Brown's NFL career was over. Not with a retirement ceremony or a Hall of Fame induction, but with him running half-naked off a football field while millions watched in disbelief. Without football structuring his life, Antonio's situation deteriorated rapidly. The legal problems that had simmered during his playing days exploded into full view. In 2020, he'd already pleaded no contest to felony burglary and battery charges after an incident with a moving truck driver. The court sentenced him to probation, community service, and anger management, requirements he struggled to meet consistently. Child support became a recurring nightmare. Multiple arrest warrants were issued when Antonio failed to make payments to former partners. In April 2023, he owed $30,000 and was ordered arrested until he made the payment. He barely avoided jail by scraping together the money, only to face another warrant in August for $15,000 in missed payments. The pattern was clear. Even with millions earned during his career, Antonio was struggling to meet basic financial obligations. The business ventures he'd hoped would replace football income crumbled one by one. His ownership of the Albany Empire Arena football team became a soap opera of fired coaches, missed payments, and confused ownership structures. Antonio claimed to be the sole owner. Then his representative said he had no ownership at all. Then documents showed he owned 95% through some mysterious trust. The team was eventually kicked out of the league for refusing to pay franchise fees. His music career, launched with tracks like Whole Lot of Money and Pit Not the Palace, generated more headlines than revenue. The songs were more noteworthy for their timing, often released immediately after his latest controversy, than their artistic merit. Every venture seemed designed more for attention than sustainable income. The financial reality became undeniable in May 2024 when Antonio filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Florida. The numbers were staggering. Just $50,000 in assets against nearly $3 million in debt. A man who had earned over $80 million during his NFL career was officially broke. The bankruptcy filing listed debts to 8 different creditors, including over $1 million from an assault lawsuit and hundreds of thousands owed to credit card companies. The only thing protecting Antonio from complete financial ruin was his Fort Lauderdale mansion, worth about $9 million, but protected under Florida's homestead laws. As long as he could make the mortgage payments, creditors couldn't touch his primary residence. It was a surreal situation. A bankrupt millionaire living in a palace, while owing millions to people he couldn't pay. But even bankruptcy wasn't rock bottom. That came on May 16, 2025, at a celebrity boxing event in Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood. What started as another typical Antonio Brown public appearance turned into something far more serious when witnesses say he grabbed a security guard's gun and fired 2 shots at a man he'd been fighting with earlier. The incident began with a confrontation between Antonio and Zulkarnain Kwame Nuntambu, a man he'd known since 2022. Video from the scene shows Antonio throwing punches as a brawl erupted in the parking lot. Security staff tried to break up the fight, but that's when things allegedly turned deadly. According to the arrest warrant, Antonio wrestled a handgun away from one of the security guards and chased after Nuntambu, firing twice as the victim ducked for cover. One bullet reportedly grazed Nuntambu's neck. Police responded to gunshot detection alerts and found Antonio in the parking lot, where he was detained but not arrested since the victim had initially fled the scene. 2 spent shell casings and an empty holster were recovered as evidence. Antonio was released after a few hours and immediately took to social media to claim he was the victim, saying he'd been jumped by multiple individuals who tried to steal my jewelry. But surveillance footage told a different story. The videos allegedly showed Antonio as the aggressor, grabbing the security guard's weapon and pursuing his target with clear intent to harm. When Miami-Dade detectives reviewed all the evidence, they obtained an arrest warrant charging Antonio with second-degree attempted with a firearm, a charge that carries up to 15 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Here's where the story takes another bizarre turn. When police went to arrest Antonio on June 11, 2025, they discovered he'd already left the country. Sources confirmed he was traveling in the Middle East, specifically Dubai. when the warrant was issued. Police don't consider him on the run since his trip began before the charges were filed, but the optics are terrible. A former NFL star wanted for attempted hiding in a foreign country while investigators build their case. Miami Police Chief Manny Morales confirmed that detectives believe Antonio is still in Dubai and have been in contact with his attorney. They expect him to be arrested when he returns to South Florida, but there's no timeline for when that might happen. For now, Antonio Brown remains a fugitive from American justice, his fall from grace complete. The attempted murder charges represent the culmination of years of escalating behavior, each incident more serious than the last. From Facebook Live violations, allegations, to bankruptcy, and now attempted murder, it's a progression that experts say was tragically predictable. Antonio's inability to accept consequences, his pattern of blaming others for his problems, and his increasing isolation from stabilizing influences created a perfect storm of self-destruction. What makes this story particularly tragic is how preventable it all seems in hindsight. Antonio's childhood trauma clearly shaped his adult behavior, but he had resources most people could never access. He earned enough money to buy therapy, security, and support systems that could have helped him process his demons constructively. Instead, he surrounded himself with enablers who fed his worst impulses and isolated himself from anyone who might have provided honest feedback. The NFL's role in Antonio's decline remains controversial. When asked during his ESPN interview whether the league provided any help during his time away, Antonio was blunt. "When you're out of the NFL, you're not their property. They don't really help you." It's a damning indictment of a system that generates billions in revenue but struggles to support players transitioning away from the game that defined their identity. Antonio's story also raises uncomfortable questions about brain trauma and its connection to behavioral changes. He's claimed at various times that he might have CTE, then denied it, then suggested his comments were meant to raise awareness about head injuries in football. The contradiction is telling. Even Antonio seems unsure whether neurological damage explains his actions, or if he's simply making excuses for poor choices. What's certain is that football provided structure, purpose, and an outlet for Antonio's intensity that nothing else has been able to replace. Without the game that had organized his life since age 6, he's struggled to find healthy ways to channel his competitive drive and need for attention. The results have been increasingly destructive, culminating in alleged violence that could cost him his freedom. The human cost extends beyond Antonio himself. He has 7 children who've watched their father's public decline, including 4 with his long-term partner Chelsea. When asked about the impact on his kids, Antonio has consistently downplayed their awareness, claiming they're too young to understand. But children aren't blind to chaos, and the long-term psychological effects of having a father whose name is synonymous with controversy and violence can't be ignored. From a financial perspective, Antonio's story serves as a cautionary tale about wealth management and the importance of sustainable post-career planning. Earning $80 million should set someone up for life, but without proper financial education and responsible decision-making, even massive wealth can disappear remarkably quickly. Legal fees, failed business ventures, child support obligations, and lifestyle inflation consumed Antonio's fortune faster than most people thought possible. The timing of his final downfall is particularly cruel. Just as the NFL was beginning to take player mental health and post-career support more seriously, Antonio's behavior became so extreme that he alienated potential advocates and burned bridges with organizations that might have helped him. His story became a cautionary tale rather than a call for reform, making it harder for other struggling former players to get the support they need. Looking at Antonio Brown's complete arc, from homeless teenager to NFL superstar to wanted fugitive, it's impossible not to feel a sense of waste and tragedy. The talent was undeniable, the work ethic was extraordinary, and the achievements were genuine. 7 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pro selections, and a Super Bowl ring represent accomplishments most players could never dream of achieving. But those achievements are now footnotes to a story about self-destruction and alleged violence. The boy from Liberty City who overcame homelessness and poverty to reach the pinnacle of professional sports had everything he'd ever dreamed of and systematically destroyed it all. Whether you view Antonio as a victim of circumstances beyond his control or the architect of his own demise probably depends on your perspective on personal responsibility versus systemic failure. The truth likely contains elements of both. What's not debatable is that Antonio Brown's story represents one of the most spectacular falls from grace in modern sports history. From earning millions to bankruptcy, from Super Bowl champion to attempted murder suspect, from beloved athlete to international fugitive, it's a transformation so complete and devastating that it still seems surreal. As Antonio hides in Dubai, facing the possibility of 15 years in prison if convicted, the final chapter of his story remains unwritten. Will he return to face the charges and potentially find some measure of redemption through accountability? Will he remain abroad indefinitely, living as a permanent exile from the country that once celebrated his achievements? Or will this saga take even more unexpected turns as the legal process unfolds? What we know for certain is that the rise of Antonio Brown was meteoric, inspiring, and genuinely impressive. The fall has been tragic, cautionary, and absolutely devastating. For a player whose identity was so completely tied to football excellence, the complete destruction of his reputation and freedom represents a kind of death, the end of everything he once was and everything he might have become. The ultimate tragedy isn't just that Antonio Brown wasted his talent or squandered his wealth. It's that a scared 16-year-old who survived homelessness through sheer determination never learned how to find security and peace as a successful adult. The very intensity that made him great on the football field became the force that destroyed everything else in his life. And now, as he faces the most serious charges of his troubled career, that destruction may finally be complete.